And we welcome you back to the show. The Little Flower Children and Family Services of New York is an organization that's committed to improving the lives and well-being of children, as well as families and people with developmental disabilities across New York City so they can reach their full potential. Now, the organization's DEIB committee is an intentional space for breaking the cycle of systemic and structural marginalization through respecting individual differences, affirming lived experiences, and impacting change within the communities. Joining me now, we are pleased to have the Manager of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Belonging at Little Flower Children and Family Services of New York. We've got Nicky Hylton-Patterson with us, and we want to thank you, Nicky, for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Great to have a conversation because when we talk a lot about social justice, one of the things that we can say is that diversity, equity, inclusion, right? These are all critical if social justice is ever going to take place, particularly in the workplace. And so from your perspective, how do you equate both, diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice?
Oh my gosh, and you can't talk about that without talking about capitalism, right? But I won't do too much capitalism education today. But what you're talking about is equity at its root, at the beginning, right? And so you mentioned just starting the lived experience and understanding that lived experience, in order to recognize and honor lived experience, because that's what diversity, equity, and inclusion is all about, recognizing and honoring the lived experience of the minoritized, right? In every space, and especially in the workplace. Right. And so what we're talking about is making sure that needs are met at every level, even though you're in the workplace. Right. It means recognizing and honoring and bringing in and welcoming your authentic self with all of your baggage. You understand? And what you're going to do about that? Are you going to leave the same way? In the Black church, it always talk about if you come and leave the same way, then you're in the wrong church. You understand? So it's the same way that the work that we're doing in terms of systemic racism and structural oppression in the workplace is attending to all of the needs of the employee. What that means is negotiating salaries. That's about equity, right? Negotiating safe space to make sure that bodies belong and feel that they belong. That's about equity, right? And for me, diversity and inclusion is a bridge to belonging. When your needs are met, you can now say that you feel like you belong because you're recognized and you're honored. And so it's a big fluffy way of answering what you said, but I'm answering the question, but I hope I answered the question.
Absolutely, you did. And so for you, working at Little Flower, talk to us about the work that goes on at Little Flower, because I know there's programs that really deal particularly in these areas, but talk to us about Little Flower.
Little Flower. When I just started at Little Flower, and so some of what I'm going to be saying is pretty formulaic and can be retrieved from the website. But so forgive me, and forgive me, your listeners as well. But at Little Flower, we provide foster care services, health and mental health care, residential treatment, and both day and residential services for adults with developmental disabilities. So we work across the gamut. We are an affiliated organization with St. John Residence for Boys. It's a juvenile justice institution where we work with youth ages from in Rockaway Park, Queens, where we work with youth to prepare them for transition either back to their families or into the communities. And so it's one of the only few service providers that work with children and youth from birth to 21, the continuum of care, and birth to 21 and into senior and adulthood for folks with developmental disabilities. So I hope I didn't miss anything.
I do want to get to you on this area right here because while you're talking about Little Flower, I know one area that you're very good on is diversity, equity, inclusion.
Yes.
And let's talk about right now some initiatives because what is it out there that people should be paying attention to when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
You should start with being honest and being humble. Right? And the first thing that needs to happen is to do assessments. You have to do an audit of the self, right? An audit of the organization, a clean audit, an impartial audit, if possible, right? You have to be willing to invest the time and in a lot of instances, the money, right? You have to be ready to do an audit, right? After the audit, you have to be ready to come together and recognize the opportunities, the strengths and the weaknesses that the organization presents, right? And in a lot of times, what we're seeing across the board in human services is that, especially in leadership, they don't look Black and brown, many of them, right? What you see in human services a lot of times is that Black and brown folks, we are overrepresented in frontline staffage, right? We're represented in hands-on care. And so our customer facing work. And so it's important that there be opportunities, even when the results of the audit come back, that you see things like opportunities for growth, in professional growth, that is specific to underrepresented folks, or especially folks that are overrepresented in certain situations. So you're looking for certain things to come out of it, right? You're looking for commitment, especially if you have boards or trustees. You're looking for things to come out of it, like the board is going to have its own process. The board is going to look at what diversifying really means, right? And so you're looking for things like that. So what I'm speaking to is a process, is a commitment to a process, a long process, right? That is going to be grueling, that to be intentional, it needs to be brave and audacious in order to achieve progress then, in rather than success.
You speak about something, you speak about process, right? And if I'm a person that's looking for change, we hear that all the time, right? I have to wait and go through this process, or diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. This is a process. But what do you say to organizations? Because, we know businesses, and sometimes they can start off with great intentions, but that one word right there will keep doing exactly going from start to finish. So how do we help businesses? How do we help organizations? How do we help others to be able to navigate the full process and not just start off good, but then all of a sudden we're hot, but then there's no follow through.
Losing momentum is one of the biggest things. And that's exactly what you're talking about, Daren. You're talking about losing momentum. Start great, but then, and that's what when I mentioned investment, intentional investment, you have to bring out the money. You have to find it. And that's why I mentioned capitalism in the beginning, because even human services, even service providers, services that are free are not free. This is the game. This is capitalism, right? So the money has to be in play. You have to invest in staff that are dedicated to the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Not only that, but the staff that are there, the staff that have been plowing away and losing momentum and so on, they have to be empowered. They can't be like a shelf life or a shelf product. They have to take action. They have to take ownership of what's going on. And they have to be able to see that when they make a decision or they provide input, that it goes all the way to change. If they don't see that, even within a year, even within the first year, you have to show people that what they're asking, what they're suggesting, right, is lining up with the goals, and even progressive or incremental opportunities or visions of change will happen. Yeah.
You know, it's funny because I hear so many people talk about equity. And when I think about equity, the definition doesn't always line up, right? Because if I have a dollar bill and you have a dollar bill, somebody say that's equity. But that's not really equity if the dollar bill that I have is a $10 bill and the dollar bill that you have is a $100 bill.
Exactly.
So many people out there saying, hey, listen, you know what? You got a dollar bill, I got a dollar bill. And that mentality is something that needs to be combated. So that way we can get to a place of health, of having real sustainable outcomes that we're really looking to see.
You know what equity is? Well, and I was going to say, as someone who's an immigrant to this amazing country, I was just going to say $1 Jamaican and the $1 US. That's the kind of equity I immediately thought, right? That dollar bill could be even more powerful, even though it's the same dollar bill. And it comes with a lot of things, like your dollar bill comes with a lot of things like the idea of colonial imperialism or colonialism. But you're talking about, what you're talking about is equity that understands that people are not at the same starting point, right? We're not at the same starting point, and we need different resources so that we can access the same things, right? We need different resources, different preparation. We need to understand. So for example, in our program, in designing our program, our programs around diversity, equity, inclusion at Little Flower and St. John residents, we are aware that much of our staff are frontline workers. Much of our staff don't have access to working from home, right? They don't have access to working from home. They need to, and they don't, on the job, they are not going to be able to check emails, right? They're not going to be able to check emails, and they're concerned with salary, right? So if you can't butter your bread, diversity, equity, and inclusion ain't gonna mean nothing to you, right? So we make sure that even there, we're at the table, right? Even there, we're working with our executive director, our CEO, Corinne is communicating all the time because of equity, to let them know what's going on with negotiations around salary. That's equity, right? Understanding the needs of the people. So I can't, in order to communicate with staff on the ground, I have to go on the ground. I have to go on the ground and meet them one-on-one, face-to-face, and make sure that equity is me not taking the information from them and exploiting it just to keep my job.
It's a conversation that we have to continue to have, and I definitely want to bring you back to talk more about it. I mean, as you said, we can talk about diversity for a long time. You can talk about equity for a long time.
Yeah.
Inclusion for a long time, and belonging, because it's a terrible thing to be in an environment and you feel like you don't belong. And so we got to bring back, got to continue that conversation. Yes. I want to thank you for the time that you spent today with us, Nicky, and certainly we'll continue to follow up. Now, for people who want to find out more about the organization, how to get connected?
They can connect us on our website at lfchild.org. Little Flower, that's lfchild.org, or by calling us at 631-644-1421.
Well, Nicky Hylton-Patterson, our guest, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Make sure, listen, that we continue to have this conversation, because it's a conversation that really needs to be had. Diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, major things that we need to be talking about in 2023 right here on the Social Justice Forums. I want you to stay with us. We got more right after this.